These figurative works I don't really see as personalities. Instead, I kind of see them as costumes, almost like a coat hanger. And it's much more for me about playing with texture and colour and shape. I'm often thinking about tropes of how figurative sculpture has been shown in important galleries and trying to mess a little bit with that, making them maybe more like dolls or puppets and really on the edge of good taste. I think good taste in the art world can be boring sometimes, and of course good taste is often men's taste, and I think we're really seeing in the last years a resurgence in handicrafts, women's interest, and I actually think that children's interest is just as important as adults too, so that's why I guess these puppets and dolls feeling, even though it's sort of embarrassing to show, and I'm also find them awkward and uncomfortable, but maybe that's why I find them interesting too. So in Gallery 1, which is the biggest gallery here in the set of Northern Wing, I have some sculptures, some are rubber and some are bronze. 2 are bronze, in fact, the biggest of the works. I really like to show them together because I like it to be a little bit confusing for people what the material is. I started using this rubber, I think, about 20 years ago. I went on a residency in Brazil, and I was walking around the craft markets, and I found this very lovely artisan Dalindo, and we couldn't speak. We didn't have a translator, but somehow through hands and feet, as the Italians would say, we communicated enough that I was invited to his studio, and I learned to work with the rubber with him there. When I'm working with my rubber, I start with quite a big pot, and so I'll try and do, with, say, this mermaid here, which is quite a large work, it would be done in 1, 2, maybe 5 different pots of rubber, and I heat it up often 2 pots at a time. I can't quite predict how much rubber I need for a sculpture, so I'm often making a little bit more. So when I've finished the sculpture and I had some left over, I try and make very quick sculptures that I don't pre-plan, and I just think, okay, some rubber, it's hot, I've got this much, what am I going to make? Smaller works are quite important to me because I can make them very fast. The bigger you get, usually the more days you have to spend on things, and I'm quite an impatient person, and I do like to immediately get a feel for the work by making it. So if something takes me too many days, I'm sort of lost interest quite often. I've been working for a very long time with a potter called Nicholas Brandon, and he is our family potter, really. In New Zealand, I think until the late 70s, we had a bit of an embargo on goods imported from China. So you couldn't buy cheap whiteware, and a lot of New Zealanders bought their homeware, all their domestic wear, from potters. I'd just come from Christchurch, where there'd been a really major earthquake 3 years before, and I'd really been starting to see the rebuild and really think about rocks and humans, and somehow that took me to the Sisyphus story about humans, well, a human lugging this big rock up a hill. And so these works were all decorated with the drawings I was doing at the time of both Sisyphus and Atlantis. Recently I've been making these soft sculptures. The bigger one in this show is called Crying Effigy, and after making that, I felt like the face was, for me, the most interesting part of that sculpture, so I started making masks that would operate in a similar way. Sewing was the first thing that I was good at, and I did a lot of sewing as a child, so I sew fast and I collect fabrics, so it's a really lovely way for me to pull out my fabrics and quickly make works. Originally, I planned to make a really large dinosaur for this show to almost obliterate a room. But technically, it was really crazy difficult. So halfway through the process, I cut it in half and only made the top half of the dinosaur pile. So there's 2, which then left me with quite a tricky conundrum of how to engineer this to stand. And that's kind of the nice thing with changing your mind halfway through a system. So I decided instead to put it on 3 different plinths and kind of clambering over and squashing 3 other smaller sculptures. This work I couldn't make in London because A, it was going to be really big, and B, when I'm working with large amounts of rubber, I can't obviously put it into a bath because no one has a tub that big. So I need a lot of water and a building that I can wet the floor. And luckily enough, my niece has a very lovely stardal, which is a kind of garage in the north of Italy. And I've worked there often, maybe once a year for the last 3 years. She lives on a private road, so I can take the work outside and inside. And so once I got my armature together and covered the armature with bubble wrap, I had 4 assistants helping me roll out large amounts of rubber. We use it a bit like baking, so we slap it down, roll it out with a rolling pin, and then we can take these sheets and invert them onto the armature. So when I'm making my dinosaurs, I don't research it in any way. I draw what I seem to remember a dinosaur might look like and go for it. And of course, the longer I make dinosaurs myself, the further away from reality I'm sure they get. And I like this because I think we're wrong about pretty much everything. And to really go down an incorrect path is a fun system for me. When I'm modelling the faces on these mermaids, or the horse on the centaur, or the eels, I don't go and look at eels or horses. I try and bring it all back from memory. And we all know how fallible memory is. And I really find that interesting.